Hi guys, thanks for joining us again. If you just joined us, and we'll wait a few minutes for more people to come in. We had a great opportunity here because we have one of our lovely friends, Holly, who's a hairdresser here in New York City, and she wanted to do some razor cutting and something simple that I think is a great lesson, kind of a one length line with the razor. I think obviously lots of people, when they think of the razor, they think of lots of texture and shred with either a straight razor or sometimes what we call a stick razor or a folding razor. But you can get a lot of very soft control and very soft lines. I'm going to show you how to do that here. It's going to be a very simple haircut, quick, using the one length theory, taking sections parallel to the line that I'm cutting, just a horizontal section here, keeping the hair damp but not soaking wet, working with the fine teeth of the comb, coming down. We discussed the length. We want it to be just like right below her clavicle in the front. Now this is going to be what we call edge cutting. So you can notice I'll be cutting from the side of the hair with a closed or a small stroke, very close to the body. Minimal elevation and a closed or a small stroke to create a line. You can see I've got her cape turned a little bit just so the buttons stay out of the way here, so I've got a smooth cutting surface to work on. Fine teeth of the comb, good tension. Get the fingers right behind the comb, come in, give yourself a little bit of access with the edge of the blade and a smaller closed stroke. So again, you can see getting a line with the razor. Now the nice thing is the line will have a little bit of texture and taper to it as we work our way up. Now when I'm trying to cut a little bit more of a defined cut with the razor, every time I put my baseline in or my guideline in, I always do a little checking with the scissor. And that'll probably be the last time I pick up the scissor until the end of the haircut. But I will do a little checking because, you know, nobody ever gets it perfect the first time. Or some of us do, I guess we get lucky. But the thing with the razor is you keep going over a baseline, you can make it a little too fine and weak. So if you want to just dust a little bit, and that feels pretty good, now I can move on. We want to take sections about a ½ inch thick, not too thick, but not too thin, because we need a little bit of substance for the razor to grab and cut well. I'm taking just plain horizontal sections because that's the line that I'm cutting. She doesn't want it longer in the front or shorter in the front. We're going for kind of a square feel here. Using the wide side of the comb to take sections. Now if the hair feels like it's dried off a little too much, I'm going to spritz it. I've got a little bit of like a prep spray in there to keep the dampness even.
Smells wonderful.
Smells wonderful. Fine teeth of the comb. You're looking for the guide, there it is. Obviously when the hair's a little finer, it can be a little bit trickier to find that guide. So give yourself a little bit of extra time to make sure you have it. And since with razor cutting, tension is so important, especially with this type of line, you'll notice I only cut from my knuckle to my fingertip or my fingertip to my knuckle. And I try to overlap my fingers a little bit so that I get really good tension. Come through, follow the comb. Now coming in with the heel edge of the razor and a fairly closed stroke. Trying to get a nice rhythm with that stroke so I've got the same quality to the line on both sides. And that can be the hardest part. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Combing it down. Looking at the line. It's nice against the black cape here. And if I can use the flat razor a little bit for balance sometimes, but not too much. Okay, now moving up the head. So we'd love to hear your questions about razor cutting or anything in general. I love to talk about really anything. As I go up the head, I start to take my sections, maybe just a little bit of an angle here to work with the contour of the head and not include too much hair from the sides. So again, doing a very simple or fundamental razor cut here. It's the first razor cut that I think it's good to master if you want to really start to incorporate this tool. So here's a trick, you know, with her fine hair, sometimes I can just take one side at a time to make sure I can really see the guide. So again, if I wanted graduation, every section that I was cutting, I would open the stroke or use larger, deeper strokes. But since we don't want graduation, not a lot of it anyway, we're keeping the strokes all consistent in what we call closed or short.
What was the prep spray?
That was an R&Co prep spray.
And let me see, on the market for a new razor.
Well, personally, I highly recommend, you know, if you really want to embrace razor cutting, I think that the folding razors are the best. And this one's made by Feather Plie. I think that that's the best one. You can find them on our e-commerce store, hairbrain.pro. $125 with a box of blades.
Let me just get a better angle here.
So coming through on the second side now, trying to keep that texture consistent. So not only are you building a line, but with the razor, there has to be precision in the amount of texture or openness or closedness in the blade. Continuing to work up. Now we've got Patty monitoring the questions as well. So Patty, you let us know if there are any good questions coming in. And guys, if you have any questions about anything at all, I'm very opinionated, so I'd love to tell you. Well, it doesn't mean I'm right, but I'll give you what I think is a good answer. So you can see here I've contoured a little bit to the head shape on these last couple of sections so that I could really keep it behind the ears and control the amount of weight. I don't always section the same way. I think being really dogmatic in hair cutting, for me, I find limiting. So, I try to think about my rules and my fundamentals, and then from there, I basically go with the feeling. So here I felt like as I came up, I would follow the head a little bit more, and I'll probably end up vertical here, and then I'll switch back to horizontal for the sides. So again, very fundamental cut here, but super important, especially to those of you that maybe want to get more into razor cutting, especially with the folding razor. Now you'll notice the way that I'm holding it. This is very important. We call it lock and load. Lots of times when people razor cut, especially with a folding razor, maybe they put their pointer finger on the comb, and that, you can manage it. I did probably for the first couple of years, but you tend to cut yourself more and have more random mistakes and less control. So I learned to pull back with my pointer finger and lock it, and then sandwich the comb between these beautiful little sausages here. It's like a sausage comb sandwich for great control and safety. And that little tip, as I started to practice that, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, made all the difference in my razor cutting. So trying to keep it closed. And by that, in this case, I mean the up and down motion of the blade is probably no more than a ½ inch. The first two sections, I kept it as small as possible. 1/8 of an inch if I could manage that. Now just a little tiny bit of openness, but no real extreme texture. It's just gonna soften the ends of a one-length cut. You could then go in and do lots of layers or texturizing or really anything. Switch to the scissor. I think this is a great way. If you're a real scissor cutter but you want to try some razoring, start doing your outlines on your long layers and your bobs with the razor, and then you can still switch to the scissor to do the internal part. You can see once I get going, I can kind of rotate my hand into the blade. The holding hand, I call opening the door. It turns just a little bit so that I can really stay on the edge of the blade. Because if I start getting too flat, I'm gonna get a lot of graduation and texture on the surface of the cut, and that's not really what Holly wants.
When I first started razor cutting, that was my biggest challenge. Was
Keeping,
right there, getting around the shoulder when I was trying to do a very low to no elevation.
Yeah, it's tricky with scissor or razor.
Yeah.
But the razor, there's a couple extra dynamics that you have to manage. And the blade can almost automatically go more flat. So when I say flat, it means this way, almost like shaving the hair, which sometimes we do, but it gives a way more dramatic effect. And if someone wants a simple one-length haircut with just soft ends, that would be a little too aggressive. So I'm coming from the side of the hair, and I'm always looking at the amount of hair that I cut off to see that it's in that ½ inch range consistently. you know, once you master this haircut, then you can start to go into razor graduation, where you deliberately use different strokes on every section that you cut, opening the blade more and more to produce graduated texture. How's it going over there, Patty? Any questions coming in?
None so far.
All right. Working up to the same point on the opposite side. You know, Holly's hair wasn't soaking wet when we started, so I have to really keep it damp. You know, we're in a little studio here. It doesn't have a bowl or a sink, so she washed it at home. I applied some prep spray to it, and now I just make sure I keep it consistently damp. It's, you know, probably wouldn't need to dampen it quite as much if it was soaking, you know, from the beginning.
My hair holds water like a sponge.
Right on.
Jordan, it seems like there's a lot of like left-handers in the crowd today. Is there any, if you can go along your haircut, give me any left-handed tips?
Yeah, so you hold it in your left hand, and you do the same. So all that's the same. And then when you're combing and you come in, you work with the tip when you're going to the left and the heel when you're going to the right. It's exactly the opposite. I can mimic it, but I can't do it very well. So you can hold it like this, you'd comb, you'd come in, and then on this side you would use tip to the left with the edge of the blade, heel to the right with the bottom of the blade. It's exactly the opposite of what a right-hander does. What I do on the right, you do on the left. I know it could be a little frustrating for left-handers, but I've taught a lot in my day, and I think the key is if you're working with an instructor or you're watching a video, you look at the right side, and whatever they do on the right side, you do on the left, generally, and then vice versa. It's just a mirror image or a swap. Everything else should be basically the same. Okay, so what Holly wanted was keep lots of weight in her hair, but with a soft line on the ends, that last ½ inch. I feel like we've accomplished that in the back, although I am going to do a quick scissor check on my balance before I move into the sides. Just because those are going to give me the guide for the sides, and if anything's off now, then I'll have more difficulty later.
Sorry, I don't have a good angle here. Let me see.
And again, of course, I want to use point cutting because I don't want to blunt it, and I want to try to close the scissor as I pull away. Not as I go in, as I pull away. So think of it like tweezing almost.
My crease joins slow.
Hey Ben, what's up, buddy? Doing some nice simple razor work here. Maybe one of these days I'll put the razor in Ben's hands and see what kind of madness he comes up with. Okay, very simple. We're more than halfway through because the sides aren't excessively thick. And we'll start to drop those down now. So again, I worked up the back horizontally, about 4 sections. Then I started to pivot off the top of the ear up to the crown. It's one of the many ways that you can section off a one length kind of haircut. You know, now again, is it truly one length if you're cutting it with a razor? I think that that's a fair question, you know, because it's automatically going to get a little bit of graduation on it. So it's a razor one length, you know? So you are going to get a little bit of softness on the line, but that can be a nice thing. Okay, we're going to take a section now, coming from about the mastoid area, all the way into the sides. And it can be a little bit healthier because we're working over the ear, which is typically finer, and the ears typically tend to protrude a little bit. Although at this length, it's not as much of an issue because there'll be plenty of weight to control them. I'm going to resection the opposite side, or section the opposite side the same, to make my life and balance much easier. Of course, you can work totally up one side and then the other, but it makes it a little bit trickier, and I like easy. Now, the little tip that I'm going to give here at this length for Holly's hair, if I was to cut it either with a razor or a scissor out here on the shoulder, it would definitely be elevated. So I have a couple of options. I can over direct it towards the back and blend it into the line at the back. If we were trying to protect a little bit of an extra weight or a corner on the front, or get even a little bit of an A-line / triangular feeling. Or We can turn Holly's head this way
Oh my God.
and let that hair fall naturally here. And now have very low elevation, either with a scissor or a razor, and be able to get a line that's more even with the back. So you can bring it to the back. You can cut it on the outside of the shoulder, but you're definitely gonna get more graduation than if you do it this way. So these fine hairline hairs can be hard to razor, so you wanna make sure they're damp and you have a good tension on them. Really fine teeth of a fine cutting comb. This is a new comb that I'm playing with, a new material from a comb manufacturer in Asia. And so far I like it.
So can you just show us that if you were cutting in a lefty?
If I was cutting in a lefty, it would be in the opposite hand, and I'd be cutting with the tip, like this, like that.
Great.
So it's a mirror image, which I'm about to do on this side. Just gonna look at it. I think it might be a touch long right now, but that hair does tend to shrink up a little bit. So we'll give it a minute. I don't think it's excessively long towards the front, but this hair, being that it's so fine, this will easily shrink up on us. So we'll take a minute with it. You can always adjust, but we can never put it back. Clean section by the back of the ear. Combing through, natural fall. The gown is twisted around. It doesn't really have to be anymore. I can readjust it now, because when I was working in the back, I didn't want those buttons in the way. You can see the lovely teach-in that my beautiful wife Kelly did for our last teach-in show. There we go. Keep the chin in a natural position, so it shouldn't be angled down or up. Just turn slightly to the side. Very fine here, so very delicate closed stroke. You just kind of almost push the blade through the hair. So as I mentioned earlier, lots of times when I put in a first section or a baseline section, I'll check it with the scissor. Especially with a haircut like this, it's not, you know, if I'm doing a much more softer, more tapered feeling with the razor, I might never pick up the scissor. But here we're working more fundamentally. Looking for that squareness. And here. This side, when I looked at it before, I felt like I might have had a little too much at the front, might have been a little conservative. So let's see what we have. Yes. So I do change back and forth a bit from scissor to razor. Trained as a scissor cutter, that's always my go-to. Checking for balance. Holding in the comb will ensure that there's the least amount of graduation, but still softening the ends a little bit by pointing. Okay, feeling good about that now. Back to the razor and we'll complete these sides. So that first section was a little bit healthier because it can be thinner. Now we're back to that general kind of 1/2 inch. And I can either work up one side, which I probably will now that I have a guide on both sides, just for efficiency and making it easier on Kelly with the camera. Clean section at the back of the ear. There is a little transition point I have to look for here. So I will come back here and make sure that this is flush with the head. And I'll check some of this away right here. And then we'll do the turn. So there's kind of a transition point here, whether I do this with the scissor or the razor. Anything coming in for us, Patty?
No.
No. Connection's not good for you?
Not that great.
It's good. Everyone's just saying, you know, nice things, great things. Scissor haircut look up. Grown out good. Thanks for the haircutting classes.
Absolutely. That's what we do. Okay, I'm going to stay on this side and finish it off. On the light side here, probably finish this off in about 2 sections. Notice I use the wide side of the comb to take the sections, generally. and to kind of comb through the hair. You know, moving it around is very important with the razor because it's, you know, it's not purely technical, it's visual as well, which is one of the things I really love about it. Love technical combined with visual. So all the good habits have to be there, the combing, the tension, the control of the tool, but sometimes you just have to let it go a little bit and go with the sketch and go with the feeling. Last section and some of the crown growth here. I'm going to make sure this hair is dampened again.
I love that stuff.
Yeah. That's just water, so it's just reactivating the prep spray. So again, looking in the back, any little strands. Clean section at the back of the ear, turning it around. We're running out because of where the layers were previously here. Got something for us, Patty?
Will you be doing any concave bob tutorials?
Yeah, eventually. Yeah. You know, we're going to try to work through all the razor cutting. So we're starting with the fundamentals here, one length. And then within the next few weeks, I'll do some graduation, or what people might call concave or A-line bob. You know, so over the next few months, I'm going to walk you through as many of the fundamentals as I can, in addition to our regular Hairbrain Live with all the different guest artists. So if you want to really kind of get a taste of razor fundamentals, or what I call razor craft, you know, keep your eyes out for that.
Any hair types you prefer not to razor?
That's a great question. Who asked that?
Chrissy.
Chrissy, what's Chrissy's last name?
Martin?
Hey, Chrissy Martin. I recognize that name, but I guess it's fairly common, but I do recognize it. I think that's a great question, and I think it's difficult to answer because I have razored straight, fine hair that in the end I don't feel reacted very well to the razor, and I've razored curly, thick hair that has. I think it's a case-by-case basis, and I think you have to get started, see how that hair reacts, and if you like what it's doing, then it's working well. If you don't like what it's doing, you can always switch tools. Now, that sounds like a kind of evasive answer, and maybe it is, but the other tip I would give you is if you learn how to work with the edge of the razor really well, rather than the flat of the razor, and you learn how to work safely with an unguarded razor, you can work with a lot more hair textures because you can be more gentle and more precise, and it's not always about, you know, kind of scraping the hair. I will say that the one thing that I do like is to razor on hair that's slightly damp. I personally am not a big fan of dry razor cutting, although some people do it really well.
I do.
There you go.
Emma Thompson says thank you.
Emma Thompson is watching? Isn't she a famous actress?
Emma Thompson?
Yeah.
Thomason.
Isn't she a famous actress?
Any razor brand you prefer?
You know, if you're going to go for the folding razor, I really recommend a plie. This is one with a custom wood handle. They normally come with a beautiful kind of space-age plastic handle. We sell that one on Hairbrain Pro. And it comes with your first box of 20 blades for $125, which is the best price you're probably going to find anywhere. If you're going to go more with a standard kind of stick razor, which I think is fine, you know, especially if you're either, number one, not sure you're going to love razor cutting, number two, you have a fear of this type of razor, all those things are fine. I really like the the Persona Flare, distributed by Spilo. That's a very affordable quality tool, and you can get started by using that. That's the Persona Flare. Feather also makes a guarded razor called the Feather Styling Razor. This is a Feather plie. So just looking at some of the ends here, I think we've got them all. Time to switch back to the scissor.
Douglas McCoy says hello.
What's up, Dougie? When are we going to do a Hairbrain Live with Douglas McCoy? I think we have to get out to his neck of the woods at some point, or track him down. Doug's a great razor cutter. And the thing I love about razor cutting is that it really allows your personality to come out. Not that scissor cutting doesn't, but razor cutting I think really allows it to come out in a very personal way because it's like kind of writing your signature. And I think when you see people that really razor a lot or razor well, we all do it a little differently, which I think is wonderful.
I really gravitated to razor right away, very early in my career, because originally I was an illustrator and painter.
Yeah, so it's the
And
same kind of hold.
Yeah. So like, it really spoke to me.
It definitely, you know,
Very early on.
it feels artistic. You know, whatever you want to say about it, you know, whether you love it or hate it, it feels artistic because of the way that you hold it and the stroking kind of motion. Where scissoring maybe feels a little more clinical, not to say that it can't be very artistic, but just the hold and the way that you do it, it's a different kind of relationship with the tool. So here, just checking. Again, you know, I think, again, this can be a little controversial or confusing. I think not everybody likes the idea of using a scissor at the end of a razor cut, but I do, and I found this worked very well for my clients and myself to seal the ends and to really kind of, you know, air cut the ends just to make sure. Because to me, razor cut's not just about the ends being, you know, kind of chewy. It's about that little bit above the ends. So the ends here, especially since it's basically a one-length haircut, they can be kind of clean, but they can have a soft bit of graduation above them. And especially with that old color on the ends here.
I too will very often follow the line with a little bit of scissor.
Yeah. As long as it's minimal. If you see me cutting off an inch or a half an inch or something, it doesn't make
Then
much
I changed my mind and I decided it needed to be a scissor cut.
That can happen as well.
Yeah.
Gail Boyd wanted to circle back to a point of when you say you're using a razor and if you don't like what it's doing, then you would switch back to it. What's an example of that?
You know, I just visually, if you look at it, and let's say the line isn't laying the way that you want, or the ends look frizzier than you hoped.
Or
I
the
think,
texture's opening up more than you anticipated.
yeah, hair's getting too hollow.
Yeah, like when I razor curly hair, sometimes that first section, it opens up more than I thought it would. And then I'm like, all right, we're gonna go back to scissors.
I mean, I say a lot to people to use some of the skill that you acquire as a colorist. You know, when you open up a foil and you're like, did it lift enough? You know, there's no like magical answer. You have to kind of use your intuition and your feeling. And I think great razor cutting is a lot like that. And I think the razor can be a lot like a bleach or lightener. When used well, it can be a powerful tool that you can make a lot of money with and get a lot of dedicated clients. But when used poorly, your hair ends up on the floor, shredded and broken.
As with anything else.
As with anything else. Okay, so we've got the basic line in. I feel like we've checked it fairly well. We're gonna do very, very simple styling. We very rarely do major styling because of the noise and the amount of time. I'm gonna use a little bit of the IME Sugar Lift, which I quite like. It's just like a nice texture spray, volume spray. And then we're just gonna do a natural dry with our hands and a sock diffuser. And I'll answer some more questions while I do that for a few minutes. So now would be a great time.
Chrissy Martin asks, do you change your razor after every cut?
I personally do. One of the reasons why I like the straight razor is because I like it really sharp. And that's why I don't particularly love a guard. So I personally do. But in reality, you can probably get away with maybe up to 3 haircuts, you know, depending on the hair texture. The truth is, you like it?
Oh, I love it.
Okay.
I'm so excited.
I was thinking maybe it was a little long, but
No,
it's a good length?
good.
Yeah. So that's typical haircut, and I should have cut it shorter. And this is starting to react nicely in the hair. Just gonna put a little bit of
And
heat
remember,
on
I
it.
curl it every day, so
So
it's
even
gonna.
shorter. See that?
This is exactly what I want.
So using my sock diffuser from YS Park, keeping the heat going down, lifting, trying to just get the roots dried first. And again, this could be dried with a round brush, a flat brush. You can do whatever you want, but in the interest of time, and plus the fact that I'm really lazy, I pretty much use the sock as much as possible. So let's hear another question. You got something for me, Cal or Patty?
Do you feel hairdressers should learn more into razor cuts in their training? Here in New Zealand, not many stylists use a razor.
Okay, great question. So, you know, the razor there's a long history here. So pre the Sassoon era, which really started in the 60s, the most popular way of cutting was the French method, which was razor cutting. And there was lots and lots of razor cutting everywhere on celebrities, and they had all kinds of fabulous names. And if you look at old textbooks, there's lots of this kind of French attitude towards hair cutting. Now, that got old, and Vidal wanted to make a revolution, and he said, let's do everything with the scissors, let's make it geometric and architectural. And it was brilliant, it was a brilliant revolution. But what happens often with people is they become dogmatic. And Vidal wasn't necessarily this way, he was an open-minded person. But I think a lot of people said, okay, well, razors must be bad, so we don't use those anymore. They're bad, bad, bad. And here we are, literally 50 years later, and people are really just starting. I think, people started razoring a lot again in the early 90s. With people at Bumble and Bumble, and my friend Nick Arrojo, Rodney Cutler. And I think that kind of started a resurgence of razor cutting without a doubt. And it took a bit more time, but I think it's coming definitely back into the forefront. And long story short, I think the foundations of great modern cutting come from geometric scissor cutting, and we should all learn that. And then I think once you've done that for a few years, you should expand your fundamentals and add fundamentals with the razor. And then if that's working for you, you should get creative with the razor. So I see it, over 5 or 6 years, 2 to 3 years of beginning to practice and master scissor cutting and precision cutting, then getting into razor cutting, and then perhaps going into really free form or making up your own kind of cutting, something very abstract to keep you interested. So I hope that answers the question. So you can see, never raking my hands through the hair. It's a very simple way of drawing. I particularly love this. I do this on the majority of my clients. When I'm done here, I'm going to be headed into the salon to do a few haircuts today. So I still work behind the chair. I practice what I preach, lifting the roots, getting the heat in. You'll notice one tip that I like to give is I don't take the nozzle off.
Oh.
Yeah, when I work with this, I feel like I can really control the heat more. And you know what happens when you take the nozzle off? It disappears. Yeah, then you never find your nozzle again. So I'm using this YS Clark sock diffuser. You can also get this at Hairbrain Pro, one of our most popular items for hand drying. Here I'm kind of rolling the ends. Again, I'm using my finger a little bit like a curling iron. Heat. See a lot of that type of work at Fashion Week, people working. We just had New York Fashion Week. We've got some great videos all over our Instagram and Facebook from Randy Taylor. He went to all the best shows. And this season, more than ever, we saw a lot of natural hair and individual hair, trying to work with each person's hair texture to make something unique happen, which I particularly love. But again, a good haircut, you should be able to style it in a lot of different ways. Again, guys, if you have any other questions for us while I finish up here, I'd love to hear them. Getting a little volume in there.
What about things that are coming up? Maybe things that we can look forward to?
Okay, so this Monday, I will be in Houston teaching a razor craft class. So anybody in Houston that wants to do hands-on with me, you can take a look through Elevate Hair. And Sunday night is kind of a jam session that we do called Elevate Hair in Houston. So Sunday night in Houston, complimentary show. We usually get about 300 or so local hairdressers turn out,
Wow.
which is great. It's a big party. We have DJs. And then the following day, if anybody wants to pay for a hands-on class, they're available. We've got several different ones going on in Houston. And then while I'm down there, that same Sunday night, Kelly's going to go out and work with a master editorial hairdresser, Frank Razzieri. Our next Hairbrain Live is going to feature Frank Razzieri on Monday night.
Styling, I believe.
Yeah, she's going to go out to the Razzieri Aveda Institute in New Jersey and hang out with Frank and his crew. Super talented, awesome people. Next Monday, we're going to go back to Hair Story Studio. and visit with another great razor cutter, Wes Sharpton, who I think is brilliant. And as I said, a lot of razor cutters develop their own technique. His is definitely slightly different from mine, which I think is fabulous. So I'm excited to go there and see somebody who works slightly different in the razor craft. Again, now that hair is getting dry is when I really want to kind of set these large pin curls in with my hands. Again, very, very simple, natural styling. Not for everyone. I'm sure a lot of people would love to blow it out, but everyone's got a different way of working, and I love natural hair. Starting to loosen it up now as it gets dry. She still has a little bit of layering from her previous haircut that we talked about earlier. She didn't want to do anything with that. She really just wanted to get the one length razor look, which I think is going to be great on her. And Holly, you said you do a lot of curling iron work at home. Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah, it's actually quite popular, you know, for hair to be a little bit more one length and have a lot of iron work, because if you put a lot of layers in, it can be a bit trickier to work with the iron.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been there, done that for like the last, what, 8 years, right? That we've been doing beach waves. That's pretty much long layered hair, right?
Yeah. All right, I'm going to come in now with a little bit of the Dry Me from Imi. Dry Me from Imi. This is a dry shampoo. You know, the fun for me is every week I'm playing with different products. You know, at Hairbrain we have 9 or 10 different sponsors, and I get to use all their products, which is really fun for me because they're just another great tool. This is nice, quite light for a dry shampoo, and it didn't leave a white cast on the hair, which is great. Feels bulked up, but not excessively heavy. I'm gonna have Holly even flip over once just to kind of really loosen this up a little. So I've kind of got the set in, and now I want to loosen it up, probably get some of the Dry Me in from this angle. So again, just to recap, super simple razor fundamental, one length, basically a square line, trying to keep the length consistent all the way around, and then a very natural dry. And you know, my goal is over the next few months to kind of do all of the razor fundamentals, maybe 6 or 7 different haircuts that I think you have to kind of really master to get great with razor cutting. And then of course, from time to time, we'll throw in some creative work too, and have all of our different guest artists every week. I kind of love it like that. A one-length haircut flipped over always looks really cool, especially with these ends on it. Any final questions coming in there?
No.
Okay.
Casey Collette wants to know if we're ever going to come to Louisville, Kentucky.
Louisville, I've been there and I love it there. I had squirrel gumbo. I did.
No.
In Bourbon, yeah. I went to a big Aveda salon, I think it's called Joseph's. And the owner was a lovely woman. She took me out to dinner to a nice restaurant and had squirrel gumbo on the menu. It was delicious.
My
and I
dad,
had all these different bourbons.
my dad once said, citrus squirrel, them good eats. That's a direct quote.
But no, that being said, again, beautiful town. You know what I love about Louisville? They have like a central park in the middle of the town that you kind of have to go through to get anywhere.
Oh, that's nice.
And it's designed by the same person who designed Central Park here in New York. I think was it Frederick Law Olmsted. But he did it after Central Park here, and he said that every mistake that he made, he corrected there.
I thought that was what they did at Prospect Park.
Well, maybe that is. I don't know. Well, maybe I made it up. Or maybe he did it in both places.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, there's a Prospect Park in Brooklyn that I heard the same thing about, too. So she still has a little roundness on this side from the previous haircut that she wanted to grow out. We talked about it from the beginning. She's trying to get back to one length. So I think that we can live with that, especially if she's, you know, getting it out of the face a little bit.
Yeah, when it's waved up, it'll make a frame.
But here we have a nice corner on both sides, and we can just kind of get this piece, just kind of lightly work with it. Again, I love that lived in. You know, I think that's an overplayed word, but I think it's, you know, something that I just happen to love. When hair looks kind of lived in and more raw, that's my kind of favorite texture. I haven't never gotten over that.
Especially with the resurgence of all the 90s fashion,
Sure.
the slightly more lived in hair just
Yeah.
makes more
It's
sense.
got a kind of a Kurt Cobain texture, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's take this off. You got something on underneath there?
I do.
Ah, too bad. All
Barely, but I
right.
do.
Barely. And there we go. There's our finished one length razor line on Holly, dried with natural texture. So again, we'll continue to do more of these razor fundamentals over the next few weeks and months. And I'll try to take you through what I think are the razor fundamentals. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Peace.